Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host. We are wrapping up this section of the Narcissist Bag of Tricks, continuing from the reference book by Robert D. Hare PhD, Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of Psychopaths Among Us. And remember, these concepts apply to the cluster B personality, not just the antisocial one. And he calls this section the complete picture. And he says that, of course, these creatures are not the only ones who lead socially deviant lifestyles. For example, a lot of criminals have some of the characteristics described previously, but because they're capable of feeling guilt, remorse, empathy, and strong emotions, they are not considered, in this case, psychopaths or other cluster Bs. A diagnosis of psychopathy is made only when there is a solid evidence that the individual matches the complete profile, that is, has most of the symptoms described in both this chapter and the preceding one. He then has a little section off to the side which will cover this Psychopathy Checklist that I've mentioned on many occasions, so it's only fair to bring it up. It's basically a list of characteristics that we've covered, the way they diagnose this condition if you have a majority of these characteristics. So he states, recently an ex-con offered Hare his opinion on this Psychopathy Checklist, and he was not very impressed. Now middle-aged, he'd spent a lot of his early adult life in prison, where he was once diagnosed as a psychopath. Here are his responses to each characteristic. Glib and superficial.
What is negative about articulation skills?
Egocentric and grandiose.
How can I attain something if I don't reach high?
Lack of empathy.
Empathy towards an enemy is a sign of weakness.
Deceitful and manipulative.
Why be truthful to the enemy? All of us are manipulative to some degree. Isn't positive manipulation common?
Shallow emotions.
Anger can lead to being labeled a psychopath.
Impulsive.
Can be associated with creativity, living in the now, being spontaneous and free.
Poor behavioral controls.
Violent and aggressive outbursts may be a defensive mechanism, a false front, a tool for survival in a jungle.
Need for excitement.
Courage to reject the routine, monotonous or uninteresting. Living on the edge, doing things that are risky, fighting, challenging, living life to the fullest. Being alive rather than dull, boring, and almost dead.
Lack of responsibility.
Shouldn't focus on human weaknesses that are common.
Early behavior problems and adult antisocial behavior.
Is the criminal record reflective of badness or nonconformity?
Interestingly, he had nothing to say about lack of remorse or guilt. In a recent article for the New York Times, Daniel Goleman wrote, data suggests that in general about 2 to 3% of people are estimated to be psychopaths, with the rate twice as high among those who live in the fragmented families of the inner cities. However, this statement and others proclaiming an increase in psychopathy in our society confuses criminality and social deviance with psychopathy, while crime and the socially deviant behavior that helps to but does not completely define psychopathy is already high among the lower class, and it's rising in society as a whole. We don't know if the relative number of psychopaths among us is also on the increase. Sociobiologists have the view that behavior development is influenced by genetic factors, and they might argue that the number of psychopaths must be increasing simply because they are very promiscuous and produce large numbers of children, some of whom may inherit a predisposition for psychopathy. Dr. Hare promises to examine this argument in later chapters, but before doing so, he wants to discuss the known aspects of the enigma. The next step into the heart of the matter brings us to the role of conscience in the regulation of behavior. I find it interesting and sometimes a little humorous when I'll see specific people making posts onto videos such as the subject matter we've covered, and they'll give a whole list of situations they go through and experiencing of feelings and ask,
I'm afraid I'm a psychopath, or afraid I'm a cluster B. What do you think?
The key here is that the very fact that they're concerned about such things indicates they're probably not in that cluster B category. Unless, of course, they're faking it and just pretending. Because if they're pretending to have a bunch of emotions and a remorse and feelings about things, and then say, am I a psychopath, or am I a cluster B? Anybody's going to say, oh, no, you're not, because you're concerned about these things. Keep in mind, these creatures not only go to therapy just to learn the terms so they can use them against you, they also have other skills, such as asking such a question. The key point to remember, though, is if you are involved with a person making such statements, or a person who's claiming not to be of this group, the best thing you can do is to ask for more information. Because chances are, if you're dealing with a cluster B, they've come up with a really quick line just to get through the conversation. That's what these people typically do. Each interaction they're involved with has nothing to do with the regular person's world, where each situation you have contributes to the whole of your life. In these people's lives, it's a compartmentalization, where they will pretend to play the part of whatever they want you to think they are, but you have to listen carefully and ask questions, because a lot of times they'll make a very bold statement, let's say, about themselves, but then when you ask for clarification, like, really, tell me about that more, they don't really have anything to say. It's because that's out of their script. All they have is the initial label of this is what I'm like, and you're just supposed to take that information and believe it. Well, honey, in this day and age, that just will not work. Because anybody who's passionate about something they say they feel should be able to go on and on and on about it until you're sick of hearing it. Which is one of the things I said to one, because I would ask deep questions and I'd get superficial, short, quick answers. One including a creature who claimed to be in love after just a few short weeks with me, and I'm like, really? You're in love with me? Oh, that's so great. Why don't you write out an essay in 1,000 words and tell me exactly what it is you love? And of course, what do you think it said? Superficial information. You might as well change the assignment to write an essay about the things you know about me, because that's the way it read. It was basically stating all the things it picked up on, which is showing you their skill, because a real person who's that thoughtful and pays attention is a good thing. But these creatures appear to be thoughtful as they monitor your every move, look in your every drawer when your back's turned, listen to whatever they can hear that you're saying and you don't know it, and they just try to infiltrate every little piece of your life, which to a non-informed person, they might think, wow, this person's really interested in me. This must be true love. But when you ask the questions, that pretty much answers this one for you if they're real or not, especially if you're older than they are, because you know that being with a person for a few minutes is not sufficient to have these deep feelings. But these creatures act as if, well, oh yes, well, that's how they are.
I can't help it. My feelings are so strong. Oh, I'm in love.
Really? What does that mean? What are you in love?
Well, I'm in love that you like music. I love that you have dogs you take care of. I love that you have an interesting point of view.
And then they use flattery. I love that you're funny. But the thing is, a person who really feels all these things wouldn't just go through a checklist. They would say, for example,
I think you're funny.
And then they would delve deeply into something that they heard that was funny, and they'd explain on multiple levels why it was funny and go on and on about it, rather than just, oh, that joke was funny, you're funny. That's not enough, and it's not going to work. So test these people. If you're with one you're not sure what it is, and if it knows what you're looking into, of course it's going to do all it can to pretend to be nothing like a cluster B creature. Most of the cluster B creature outings occur when you have a chance to observe the person from afar and not listen to the words they're saying. Because they may say, I'm environmentally friendly. I don't believe in hurting our environment. But you see them litter 10 times. Well, that's a clue. To use that example, like the previous depth example, you should be able to say, you said you're very much in touch with saving the environment, but I can't help notice that I saw you throw that McDonald's bag out your back window. I saw you throw 3 Taco Bell bags the other day out your window. And you're not really criticizing, you're just trying to make sense of it. Try this test, question these things, and if you hear something like,
oh, well, I do love the environment and don't want to cause any problems for it, but I only littered those times because I was on fire and the bag was in the way. So, or
some kind of, I am very much for the environment, even though I did these things, that anybody could look at and see are not characteristics of a person who cares about an environment. And then when questioned on it, they want to maintain the fake illusion, oh yes, they do love the environment, but on these 10 occasions, they just happen to litter because of some retarded excuse. Well, that is a clue you're dealing with one of these messed up blank faces. So run. Run as fast as you can.
I am the most beautiful narcopath you'll ever meet.
you do still think I'm pretty, don't you? You do, don't you?
And I know that time that we were out together and all those guys were coming after me at once like a stampede, accusing me of all these things, talking about AIDS. Well, honey, I contracted AIDS years ago, and I knew it. So I set out to spread my fires for as many guys as I could from that point forward, and I refused to accept protection. That was my personal choice, my revenge upon the world. Every guy I was about to sleep with, of course, would bring up the subject. Do you have any STDs or anything else? And I would always say,
oh no, I just had a test yesterday, and I'm as clean as a whistle.
They always bought it, and they didn't use any protection. They stuck it right in. About 90% of them caught it. You know what? I see it as their own fault. It's their fault they chose to believe me. They should have known better. Who cares if I'm responsible for infecting so many men? It's their fault because they chose to believe me. See?
Must I remind you that I was the only one who would ever accept you for how you were? Well, it's your law.
There were things I could do, and go with a boy or two. Even though the neighborhood may sound trashy, no good, I suppose it could be true. But there was things I could do. I could flirt with all the guys, smile at them and hold my eyes, press against them, slow it down, make them think they get a chance. Then refuse to see it through. That's the thing I'd never do. I could stay home every night, wait around for them to arrive, take showers every day, and throw my nights away on a dream that won't come true. I could hurt someone like me, have fight or jealousy.